Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast. I'm very excited to have Oliver Prill, CEO of Tide, joining us. He's going to share his entrepreneurial knowledge and insights with us. Just before I bring him on to say hello to you all, I just want to say, our mission here is to help 10 million people start a business of their own and make sure no one feels alone doing it. If anyone has any business question, we will find the answer for you. If you need anything to help your business start or grow, reach out to us via thepurposefulproject.com and we will help you. Right now, thanks to Tide, we have a fantastic competition running where you can win £25,000 to start or grow your business. I know myself how valuable that sort of money is when you're building a business. And if you want to get that money, all you have to do is go to tide.co/be your own boss and sign up for an account. I actually did it yesterday. It took me 9.5 minutes to sign up, and I'm in with a chance, I believe, to win £25,000. I don't think I'm allowed to win, but you definitely are allowed to win. Go sign up today. In addition, we've also teamed up with TikTok, Intuitive QuickBooks, and Go Cardless to bring you an additional £10,000 to start and grow your business, plus mentorship from 12 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. In addition to not only mentorship and capital, TikTok, my organization, will market your business, support your growth, and document your story. So if you'd like to win any of those prizes, then go to the hashtag Be Your Own Boss, which is trending on TikTok right now, and simply submit a 30-second video telling us what you're doing and how we can help. And on the 7th of July, we will pick a winner. So that's the promotional stuff over with. Let's get to the knowledge. I'm really excited for my next guest to come up and share his knowledge with us. So let me welcome him on stage. Oliver, welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me. Really, really well. Really looking forward to our talk.
Well, yeah, I've been reading about your incredible journey and what you've managed to do at Tide. It's really inspiring. It's such an incredible organization, aligned with my values, where you basically want to help entrepreneurs in every way you can. But I think maybe we could start off by maybe you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and for those that don't know you, what you're doing.
Yeah, so I have the great pleasure of being the CEO of Tide. We'll talk about Tide a little bit more, but it's the biggest business banking platform in the UK. We have 6%, so 6% of all SMEs, so 350,000 are there. As a company, we have the values very much aligned with what you said. So we call them member first. So if you're part of Tide, you're a member. And we really believe that doing that, and that really motivates me. And you asked about my background. So I've been in finance and banking in some form or shape for most of my life, so almost 25 years. And, often I have to say, we were sort of doing things where we're really on the side of the SME. And I did wonderful things like very early on, run businesses at RBS, built and sold my own bank in Germany, before I sort of landed at Tide. And really what makes things very different at Tide, and what really made the difference for me there is that we're really on the side of the business. So yes, we're a commercial enterprise, but we fundamentally believe doing the right thing for members will make us in the long run successful. So that I find that personally very motivational.
And I can see it in the way that the business operates, just from the user interface of being able to sign up so easily for an account. Straight off the bat, you can see that you've thought about the people that are setting up businesses or have businesses just have no time. We have no time to set up an account sometimes. So the fact that you've made it so easy is of course a very key part of what you offer. But it makes a big difference, I think, to entrepreneurs, that we don't want to get bogged down with all the paperwork. Look, to kick things off, I wondered if you could share some of your knowledge, and maybe by starting off by telling us, what does success mean to you?
Yeah, I think that this is a really, really important question, right? And I think before going into business, that's the one I think to really, really ask oneself, because, being an entrepreneur, you have to often self-motivate. So for me, it's to have meaningful impact, right? So yes, sure, we all like to be commercially successful, make money, maybe be known for things. But to me, the thing that really motivates me is when I get feedback, messages on LinkedIn or elsewhere of how Tide has changed people's lives. That's like a little anecdote you said about we making things easy. We learned very early on when people start out, they don't only need a bank account, they also need to form their business, right? So we started company formations. We're now actually the biggest company formation agent in the UK. 1 in 20 companies get formed to us and through us. And I got a lot of messages where people were saying, look, Oliver, really thankful that Tide helped me, right? It was so easy. Otherwise, I would have never taken the step into entrepreneurship. It was so easy to set up the account and open the business. And it's that sort of feedback in the end that I find most motivating and most rewarding, more than anything else.
You mentioned there that you opened up your own bank originally. I mean, it feels like starting a business in banking is so hard. For anyone listening, maybe they want to be your competition one day. How do you even begin to build a bank? How does it? What's the first step?
Well, honestly, probably this. Yeah, it's actually a really good question, and I think you probably have to completely zoom out and say, are banks actually so different? I think one of the reasons why banking has been so incredibly broken in the UK and elsewhere has been that people look at banks as this very different animal, right? And people have sort of forgotten, right, with all, they think of compliance and regulatory capital and all of that, right? That's of course part of it, but really at the heart of it, doing a business, you need to really ask, who's your customer? What is the problem you're trying to solve for them? How can you serve them better than the competition? Differentiate yourself. And my sense is a lot of banks have actually forgotten that, right? Maybe because they've existed for hundreds of years, but even some of the more modern ones, you sometimes ask, what is really your core purpose? So I would start always with the same thing, right? I mean, what is the problem you're actually trying to solve, for whom? And then, in the end, a bank is just another business. Okay, it has this regulatory angle attached to it, but otherwise, it should be just be thought of as a business as any other.
Now, you've been in business a long time. I don't want to say you're old, because that's not what I mean.
Yeah, go ahead, Simon.
But you've got a lot, maybe the better way, but you've had a lot of experience. But I mean, you must have had some pretty hard times at moments in your business career. Is there any moment that stands out, and how did you get through it? Because a lot of our listeners, I know, are struggling right now. A lot of people are struggling with their businesses, and it's been a very, very unusual time for everybody, really. But how do you get through those hard times? How have you got through those hard times?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of things, right? There's how do you psychologically, mental health-wise get through it, right? And then how do you substantially get through it? So on the mental health, I think the biggest advice I've got is on negative cognitive biases, right? So we all know this. There's one bit of bad news in the day, and we think the whole day was bad, right? And so someone told me a very simple trick. Just go in every evening when you have that thought, think of the 3 great things that happened that day that you're grateful for. And this is just your mental health. It opens up a completely different perspective on the, on the day and how to perceive things. So I think that's the one on how to sort of mentally help with it. And I wouldn't underestimate it. Often entrepreneurship is a pretty lonely thing. In the beginning, you may literally be on your own, right? And later on, even if you've got many employees, I know you're a serial entrepreneur yourself, you're often at the top, it can be very lonely, right? And so, I think this mental health, I would say, really work on it. Don't be ashamed of it. Really work on it, get the right advice for you, read up on it. There's great resources and so on. And then substantively, right, if there's a real issue, I've learned very early on that, panicking and just generally being frustrated about rarely does any good, right? It's really the best thing to do it to say, what is the problem? What is the data around it? What are the options for solving it? And then you move on. And, if the option is sometimes in entrepreneurship, it means that the business model didn't work, right? And then I think there is an advantage of failing fast. You cut your losses, no false pride about it. It just didn't work. You tried your best. If it is about, your cost structure being wrong, your product being strong, don't blame the customers or anything like that, but go in, the customer is always right. How can I actually take this as positive feedback, right? I mean, by the way, you asked about some lessons. So I've learned this thing where early on in my career, right, I was at a large UK bank, you can look it up. And there's this theory, you put a business case forward and it would be perfectly delivered. Now, after 25 years of being in business, I know any business case that you put forward will never be delivered exactly as it is, right? And maybe there will always be deviations. And so things like looking at it, assuming, coming in with the assumption you need to tweak things is very, very important, and not to be frustrated. So that's what I would say on the substantive side. Very important lessons there for me. And that's how I get through it.
some great points there. I don't want my audience to miss any of them, but I really like the counterbalance point about, if you have one negative thing happen in a day, and I think every single entrepreneur listening has probably had one negative thing happen to them today that keeps playing on their mind. Even while they're listening to us, they're probably thinking about that one thing that went wrong. And I love the counterbalance of 3 things that went well. Make sure you do that. And I also follow a similar philosophy. I think I tried to find 5, but
even better.
Even better. Yeah, it's not always easy to find 5, but it's a really good thing. And I think the other thing you're saying, my translation of it is the strongest people ask for advice. The strongest people in the world ask for help. And I always try to tell people that when they're asking for help, that's a strong thing to do. It's sometimes, it's not easy asking for help, but if you do it, you muster up the courage. And the entrepreneurial community is very, very strong. We've all been there. Pretty much any problem anyone's listening they've got right now, we've all had at some point, or we've all experienced these problems as entrepreneurs. So you can reach out. And I love your point around that. And then the final thing I really like you're saying there as well, like you mentioned data solving, using data to solve problems. I think that's not done enough either. Sometimes people try to do everything, almost emotionally, but looking at the data and solving problems is a pretty interesting way to do it. And so another great tip. I was wondering what you think about, and you mentioned here a little bit about failure and failure fast. When is something, a lot of people ask us, am I failing and it's never going to work and I should fail fast? Or is it failing but not working yet type failing? What's the difference between failing and it's not working yet?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really, really good question, right? And so I think it starts actually with the thing that we call at Tide no false pride, right? And what we mean by false pride is something was the right view yesterday, some new data arose, and you need to change path. It is completely right to change, right? There should be no false pride. This is what I said yesterday. Really, one doesn't want to be flippant, right? On random, go on a random journey. But if some new data comes, you adjust to it. And then I would say, in terms of your thing, your question of when do I fail fundamentally, the first bit is you should try to figure out the fundamental questions early, right? And there are concepts that we call MVP, minimum viable products. Try to shoeleg it, try to get some critical data on the things that are vital to your business model. I mean, usually these are things: can I acquire a customer at a reasonable expense, and will they be willing to pay for my product? Often the mistake people make is they go by far too far down into the journey, and they don't get that insight early enough, and therefore they spend a lot of resources. So we try to launch things early, get feedback, and we go in with the assumption, no false pride, to that we then adjust things. Now, when you adjust things on the data, you will know very quickly, is this a tweak, or are our customers telling us they just don't want this product, right? And then, at some stage, it is completely fine to cut your losses, right? To just say that. Now, often that's a judgment. That data can give you some sort of insight. And Simon, this is where I think the mentorship comes in. What I've really learned, I got probably most out of it, is really experienced mentors that have been around the block, right? That you can relate to, that you look up to, right? That you respect, that give you advice. So like a decision on failing or taking a decision to close your business and so on, I would always look to get some sort of validation of speaking to a mentor. And it doesn't need to be a formal mentor, but just someone you trust to have good judgment that can help you look at the data and say, am I reading this right?
All great advice. I think I always check with my wife, actually. I know, I check with my partner in life, whoever that is for you. I find that they always have my best interests at heart too. So they're really often quite, it's quite, but yeah, before I've ever closed anything, and I've had a few failures myself, it's always good to have, as you say, someone you can trust to go and talk to. On the question of mentors, because this gets asked of us a lot, what do you think the best way is to go about getting a mentor? A lot of people want a mentor. What's your advice around getting a mentor?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, Simon, this is for organizations like yourself and others, I think a huge opportunity to facilitate that, right? Because I think you're right that there's sort of different levels of mentors, and I'm also not convinced whether it's almost one mentor. So I have the same, very privileged like yourself to have a wife who I trust a lot, but, she's clearly got a certain level of experience and so on, and certain, certain perspective. And so she's in many ways, yes, my mentor. There may be other very specific things. So if you open a restaurant, right, just there is value in getting someone that has built a successful restaurant business before, right? And If you have problems with fundraising and, you need to just think of how do I do all of that, there may be even a different type of mentor. So there may be different mentors for different things. I'm not suggesting to get us to a whole, a huge set, but I'm just saying, it may not just be one. And then especially on the professional advice, so the example of another, restaurant owner and so on, I think that's often not done enough. And I think, Simon, if I look at the great thing you're building here, I would encourage a lot of entrepreneurs saying that they've really made it, because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, but they're very proud. They're very willing to share their insight, right? They don't want money for it. In part, they get satisfaction from being able to pass on that knowledge. And often they find it hard to finding mentees, right? So people they can mentor, and clearly the other way around. And I think if we can, as a society, find a way of introducing people, I think that would really, really help.
Yes, it's actually one of the reasons I started this platform, because I meet every single day of my life, entrepreneurs that have done well, have knowledge, and they're more than willing to share that knowledge. But like you say, ironically, quite often, they don't have the time. They don't necessarily have lots of spare time. They don't have time to arrange, to meet someone they can mentor. So ironically, the other side of the equation, when people are looking for mentors, there's lots of people that are looking to also give mentorship. But equally, I also think your point's very valid, and I don't want the audience to miss it, is on the point of you don't have to go looking for a mentor. You might find that someone in your family can be your mentor. You might find that someone that down the high street you live on could be your mentor that's doing well in a business. And I also think it's very relevant what you're saying around go to a sector specific mentor. I think that's really actually overlooked. Sometimes when people are looking for a mentor, maybe they're looking at someone famous, but they might not necessarily have the exact insight into your business model. And so I actually had a restaurant business that failed. So I know what you just said is the exact example is true. I never went and spoke to someone that actually run a restaurant before. I did speak to a lot of people that had done a lot of other businesses, but I missed that trick. So I wish I'd interviewed you 15 years ago and learned that. It's a very good point. So do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred?
Yeah, this is a good question. And often people do say, entrepreneurs are a breed apart. I mean, I think in my mind, there are sort of three sort of types, if I was it would be three types of entrepreneurs. There are truly those that are born entrepreneurs, right? You just know them from a very early year on, they age on, they really wanted to build a business. They've done it. They were very entrepreneurial in their youth. They've gone through. And so, yes, I do believe there's a born entrepreneur. I think then there are those that had life-changing events, right? So that learned to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes, honestly, it has to be pushed. Like people may have faced redundancy, the job may have been gone, and they said, look, now I take this opportunity to get into it. Sometimes they've built up a certain amount of wealth, right? And they said, look, now, I want to be my own boss, right? So I think that's really where entrepreneurship in a way is learned. And then if you look at the third type, which is sort of maybe in the middle of the two, which is the serial entrepreneur, right? That sort of early on had a career, they built a business, and they just moved on to business. So I see these three types broadly. By the way, if you ask me who's the best entrepreneur, I'm actually not sure whether it is, one is better than the other. I think they're just different paths to entrepreneurship, all of them extremely valid. And they just mean, the different life patterns. And I think one of the things post-pandemic, just to say that I think there will be a fourth typology, type coming, which is the part-time entrepreneur. So I think what we've learned very, very much, I think in the pandemic is we will no longer have fixed office, right? Offices and most jobs will be much more flexible. I think people have also reflected that rather than spending time on commuting and other things, they might be want to do other things on the side. Some people are very motivated by entrepreneurialism, maybe financially need to, and so I think this part-time entrepreneur is probably a fourth type that's sort of coming our way very fast. I mean, they exist to a degree today, but I think that will be a very significant trend down the road.
No, it's I guess side hustle is becoming such a a new terminology that everyone uses, and I find that I'm actually a part-time entrepreneur today. You can be a full-time entrepreneur at one point, a part-time one. I spend 3 days of my week looking after my son. I spend the other 3 days a week running the Purposeful Project, and then we have 1 day a week family time. Before anyone asks what happens to that other day, but it is a different type of entrepreneurship, but it gives you a chance to focus on something you love. And in my case, two things I love: my business and my son. And I think but I agree with you. I think there's a whole. In fact, I was speaking to someone very senior at Google this morning, who was talking about how their full-time job is Google, and they've got a part-time entrepreneur gig, running a couple of really amazing give back businesses. And the great thing about Google actually is that they're willing to they actually support that. They do an 80-20 rule, which I think is interesting, right? Where they actually encourage their employees to do that. But I agree. I'd love to see the rise of part-time entrepreneurship, and I think it gives people access to a whole new world. But I feel like for your career, look, again, just going back, did you always have this entrepreneurial be in your bonnet? Is this something? Were your parents entrepreneurs? How did you end up being so entrepreneurial yourself?
No, my parents actually, no, it's actually family of very unentrepreneurial, so family. I'm probably in the second category. That's sort of in the career have learned. So when I started university, until then very unentrepreneurial, started consulting early on, and then I realized as I went through, I actually just like the doing, right? So I was really consulting, really did it for me, where I learned, where we gave loads of advice. I couldn't do it. And I realized actually the thing I really love is to do, right? To see and have impact. And so I learned this a little bit later, so my early 20s. But I think the one thing is actually very interesting. I think people that once they're really exposed to true entrepreneurialism find it very hard to get back. So if you ask me, would I ever want to go back to a large corporate or something like that? I just could not see myself do that, right? And so I think that would be an interesting statistic actually, but I would guess there's in many ways many more people going into it than going out of entrepreneurship. Purely because once you have that freedom and you have the great experience of making things happen, it is just very, very hard to then translate that back into a very regimented working pattern that is unfortunately still around in many larger businesses.
But I noticed, because for my audience listening, I'm presently working with Tide. For full transparency, it's probably obvious because up on the screen I'm telling you we've got a competition running right with them right now. But I've got to know the Tide team, and it feels like I'm working with a group of entrepreneurs, and that's something for people listening. I know one person just made a comment. They've got a 200 people company, and they want to make that company more entrepreneurial. What's allowed you to make Tide so entrepreneurial? How have you managed to create that culture? Culture is such a big thing in business. How have you done that?
So, we actually hire a lot for it, right? So we like, people with initiatives. We give people a lot of autonomy, right? We let people get on. So we have this notion, and this, I think, where partly it's entrepreneurship, but also it merges into the whole problem of leadership and how do you lead larger teams. So we have this notion at Tide that we call the sort of the example of speedboats. So we hire captains of little speedboats. We set guardrails, right? So the speedboats don't bump into one another as they fly. But we give people a lot of freedom in the company and to do things within the guardrails. And the issue is a little bit it's self-selecting, son, right? So if you're very much used to very regimented work, being told what you have to do, you probably would find Tide quite scary. So often the feedback we get is, good God, I have a lot of, I can do all of this. Who do I have to ask? Well, I said, no one, just do it, right? And so it's a little bit self-selecting, right? At Tide, we attract people we are attractive to people that like to get on with doing things, right? So, it is in that sense quite entrepreneurial. We're completely outcome. Maybe that's another one. We're very outcome focused. So we try not to regiment, inputs, in it. So we find, for example, this whole debate over being very rigid about working from home and so on, a bit bizarre, right? Because for us, it's always, if you do your job well, why would it matter, right? Where you work, right? So that's in principle, our attitude. So I think as long as you have some, that's what we try to do, have systems and structures. Now, in all fairness, Tide now is almost 700 people, right? So we're getting quite large, but I presume you can do that already as an entrepreneur on a smaller scale. And I think the judgment there is always to make, how quickly can you let go and how quickly should you let go, right? And I think that's often what I see young entrepreneurs or early entrepreneurs, not necessarily young by age, but early in the entrepreneurship, people struggling with.
It's really refreshing to see the customer first approach and the way you're building it. I think it is for a lot of people listening. I'm hoping an inspiration to see how a new type of business can be built in an old industry. Because people always I know a lot of our listeners tell us that, oh, everything's already done already. What could I do? What could I do? And here you are reinventing banking. One of the oldest institutions that everyone thinks has already been done, right? So there's always chance to innovate, right? How do you innovate in today's world? What do you think the secret to innovation is?
So I think that the key is to solve a problem, right? And there must be a fundamental need. And then I have a great analogy that I sort of stole from Steve Jobs, right? It's then because you have to ask, as soon as you see the problem, the classic answer is do customer research. And now I tell you the problem. So Steve Jobs has this great analogy, I hope I'm getting it right, where he said, if you ask people, right, what they wanted to be transported faster, they would have said, breed faster horses, right? And you would have never built the Model T. And I think this is the problem a little bit. So you need to start with the customer and the problem, but to be innovative, you have to ask customers what Apple does, I think, for example, extremely well. What are their pain points, not what solution they want? Because most customers will not come up with the innovative solution, right? They will come up with the pain point that they have. But it's then for you and your creative team to come up with a solution. Right? I think that's sort of principle number one. So we try to be very careful about being very customer driven in terms of the problems and what are the pain points. But we then do more validatory research once we have a solution, rather than ask customers for the solution they want, because otherwise we would never build something innovative, or not that innovative. The second thing is that often innovative in innovation has this notion of doing everything different. It's actually not doing everything different. And we are actually very disciplined. So we say, on things where we don't need or want to be different, plagiarize. So like your restaurant example, like if you don't, like there are certain things that people tried for a couple of 100 years, you're not going to innovate on that dimension. Just learn from the best and let it run, right? Don't be very selective of where you're different, but then where you want to be different, a different type of food, maybe in that example, a different way of ordering or whatever, the differentiation you have, relentlessly invest in that point of differentiation, right? So those are probably the two pieces of advice I would give. I would definitely not subscribe to the thing that innovation is done with. It is actually, I would actually argue, the way to, I think of change, it's like there's always a new hill on the horizon, right? And once you climb the hill, only then do you see the next hill, right? There's never an end to this. It's an endless game. And I have to laugh when I read articles on LinkedIn and elsewhere about the end game. There is no end game, right? Because there will never be an end. Well, probably unless someone presses the button, but let's hope that doesn't happen. Otherwise, right? And there will always be a new horizon.
Nuclear devastation in this podcast. That's the first. We just hopefully that never happens. Definitely, yeah. No, I know. There's no end game. I think that's Simon Sinek is one of my favorite speakers. He's talking about the infinite game, right? Where basically exactly that. There is no end. There's just a permanent, consistent evolution. For the ones that succeed, that's how you have to think, right? If you think there's an end game, then you lose. The other thing you've just said there that I really love, which you don't hear enough from I think leading business figures like yourself, which is sometimes it's all right to copy. I think that's really important. A lot of people think you can't copy. Everything is really a copy of something else. Friendster, MySpace was a copy of Friendster, Facebook was a copy of MySpace, and so on and so forth. All of these businesses are really copies. They're just better executed or done, and like to your point, they invested in a particular unique selling point that made them scale and grow. But innovation isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel, right? I mean, copying is a really powerful thing, actually. And I think a lot of people who are listening want to start a business. Sometimes I started an agency business called Fluid. I just copied someone else's model. I didn't copy their business exactly, but I copied their model. They helped people start businesses, so I helped people start business. I just did it better than them, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's good for the consumer. That's competition. Right. So
but also it allows you to focus on your strength. See, I think the big thing that we noticed is if you try to be innovative on everything, the customer doesn't reward it, right? Because they want a point of differentiation, but also your team, your resources. And any entrepreneur, in particular at the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey, is very resource constrained, right? So you actually invest in a lot of change, right? That actually makes very little difference in the end, right? Because it's not the real point of differentiation. So always think of this USP, then relentlessly invest in that, and everything else, I would keep pretty constant from those that have spent gazillions of pounds learning it over many, many years. Right?
Do you think, looking objectively at how successful Tide has been, do you think luck played a part in that rise?
So what is luck, right? I think if luck is a little bit around the right time, yes. So we were definitely at the right time. I think for the rest of it, yes, things came together, right? But I would also say it came together because there were great people. And by the way, not just me. I mean, there were many great leaders at Tide that made things happen. And so in that sense, we were very, the definition of luck is, were we able to hire them? Were they in the place in the right time? Did the right action? Yes. But I don't believe in this thing of, I mean, probably there are some random examples, but I generally don't believe in it. You succeed by luck or by being unlucky. It can happen, right? Like a law gets changed and suddenly your business model doesn't work, right? Or, I don't know, lightning struck your home or something, whatever. These sorts of things can happen, but generally it's not about luck. It's really about, wet towel around the head, getting all the advice, do something you love so you're self-motivated, think things through, don't be disheartened, right? Be determined around things, hire the right staff. And I think that is it. And often that builds successful. I think there is a thing then around, where luck fits in, how quickly do these things come into play? So are you in the right time? So for example, is Amazon that innovative? Maybe not, right? But Jeff Bezos was there at the right time. He drove it relentlessly. He made some very good bets, on it. He put great people in charge. And so I wouldn't put it down purely to luck, but there was definitely an element on timing, right?
I bring this up because a lot of people, when we showcase a lot of successful people, and people, they were lucky, and it's an interesting phenomenon, luck in general. I mean, my research on this shows that luck is actually broken into two parts. You've got 2% of your life, which is this random luck. Let's call it where you're born. There's nothing you can do about that, and that can make a huge difference in your life, right? We all know that, and but that's only about 2% of your life, those sort of random lucks. The rest is influenced by you. So, for example, of really 3 elements: the amount of risk you take increases your chances of luck, the amount of persistence you have, and knowing your destination. Knowing what you're trying to achieve. I think those 3 things are 98% of their influence that make more luck happen. To your point, right?
Yeah, and then, by the way, if that's, success is equivalent to luck in that definition, then I'm completely with you, right? I think what I was trying to say, exactly what you said, maybe with the exception of the 2%, you can influence it. And I think what people should not be disheartened about, it's sometimes tough, right? Because also when things don't run so well, human nature is to blame it on some external event, like whatever, right? I was unlucky, it happened, this or that. As an entrepreneur, we have the beauty of being answerable to no one, right, other than ourselves and our dream. And in part, I would almost say exactly what you say, like, what can I do to influence, right, the outcome? Really focus on that. If you have setbacks, think about how could I do it better, rather than sort of focus on what you call the 2%, right, that you just cannot influence. So completely with that. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's a subject that's difficult to talk about, but I do like to bring it up because I think that for a lot of people listening, I know they find that they're looking for that lucky break, and sometimes there is no lucky break. It's literally small things, doing one, working hard, yes, but thinking about your destination and being persistent, and like you said quite rightly as well, doing something you love. This is so overlooked. People are always trying to fill a market gap, but they're not doing what they love. So, turning your hobby into a business, for example, makes total sense to me. I'd invest in that every day of the week. Someone that actually loves doing it every day is easier to follow through, right?
Exactly. And it gives you positive energy, right? So look, the one thing that's clear, like, entrepreneurialism is not a straight road, right? It's a tough journey in many ways, right? Whatever people tell you, and that's the single best thing you can influence. If you do something you inherently believe in, it gives you positive energy that sort of allows you to go on that journey, rather than dreading what you're doing, and then you have all the other challenges on top, right? So absolutely, I would actually say, I would go as far when people ask me, how do you enjoy your job? So the day I would no longer enjoy the job. I mean, it's like, doesn't matter how much I pay, how successful things are. It is really about doing what you love, because it is, that's where I get all the motivation and the energy from to address the challenges that are there every day, right? And so, no, absolutely, I think it's a very insightful point.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm conscious that you've got a business to run. I think you're we've got a few listeners in India as well. You opened up in India now, right? You've got a global expansion in play.
Yes, we're just opening up. It's still in alpha, so it's not public yet. But
Right.
watch the space. Soon on the website, you will be able to register if you're an Indian business to say, look, once we launch publicly, that you can go to. Very excited. I'm not going to give them time. Don't get me going on India. There's just such a huge opportunity there. By the way, also for British entrepreneurs running with India, maybe that's another discussion we can have at some stage. But I think it's a fantastic country. We're very excited by being able to support Indian entrepreneurs as well.
I actually launched a business in India called Devashard. It was based on a story called the Mahabharata, a comic book series, and I absolutely loved it. I learned so much. I spent quite a few years in and out of India learning about it. So, but anyway, maybe when I don't know if we almost got an exclusive there, did we, about what's happening with Titan plans? But yeah, look, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and sharing your knowledge with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I guess I'll just end. If you went back to your younger self and gave some advice, what would it be?
And that's the 1 minute question. So I'm not sure. I would just say, on the topic of entrepreneurship, don't wait for too long. I think probably I waited too long to go on the entrepreneurial journey because I was afraid of various other things. I think don't be afraid to fail. As a matter of fact, it's a lot easier before you have kids and before you do things. So, if you believe in it, I think especially today with employers, it doesn't matter if there was a business that didn't work out. You can signal entrepreneurial, spirit, and many employers are starting to look at that. So I think that's probably the one advice I would give. I would have probably started on the entrepreneurial journey a lot earlier if I had that advice in a different time. Maybe that's your definition of luck.
No, but it's I was going to add on to luck. Sometimes if you have bad luck, I sadly I lost my father when I was 15 years old, and that was an awful piece of luck, and I missed him very much. But equally, he gave me a gift at the same time, because I went and started a business 3 weeks later because I wanted to support my new existence without my father, and I started young because he didn't. He started late in life and had a heart attack because it stressed him out. So I think bad luck can be in a weird way good luck in disguise. And in addition, because of my own personal story, what you just said really resonates with me. I think I'm so glad I started young, because you can make a lot of mistakes when you're young. And the more, the younger you are, the more mistakes you can make. So it's good. And I think such great advice. And so, but look, again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for sharing your knowledge. I really love every element you've talked about today. The 3 great things that have happened to you today, folks. If you're listening, go write them down. Don't worry about that one thing that's gone bad. As I said, strong people ask for help. So I love the whole no false pride piece that you made. Fail fast. Always love that. And your mentor might actually be sitting right next to you and you don't realize it. So Oliver, thank you for taking time out to share your insights with us today.
Thank you for having me, Simon. Great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, folks, that's it. I hope you found today's podcast useful and interesting. If you want to win £25,000, I can't even believe I'm saying it. You just want to get £25,000 to start your business or help you grow your existing business. And all you have to do is take 10 minutes out and go and sign up for a Tide account, which you should have anyway. I did it yesterday. It's awesome. They're already giving loads of free help to me, and I know what I'm doing, and I still find their help useful. So guys, go check it out. Go sign up. You've got to believe you can win it. Don't be skeptical thinking you won't be the one that wins it. You might be. Just try. I have personally invested in 69 startups. The ones that have succeeded, I've noticed, were always optimists, the people that believe they could win. So you've got to believe you can win. So go and try. In addition, don't forget, we're partnered with TikTok right now. We're the #1 trending hashtag on there with over 200 million views. Be your own boss. So clearly a lot of you want to be. Go on there, make a video, tell us what you're up to and how we can help. And we'll make sure that people will mentor you, will promote you on TikTok, and will support your business ambitions and growth. So that's it, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.